I'm here to tell you, we serve an awesome and mighty God. And we have to relate to him. We have to get closer to him. We have to worship him like my wife said. We have to give our life to him. Because all he wants to do is love us. He wants the best for us. The best for us, first and foremost, spiritually. He wants to take us higher in him. He wants to put us in a place where we are at peace no matter what happens. Circumstances don't bother. Life don't bother. The government don't bother. You don't care who president. You don't care who governor. You don't care who mayor. Because you got a God that's over all of them. And he's proven to you. He says, I already predetermined. I already prearranged this plan for Jesus.
Yes.
And then he says, you nailed, he's talking now to the crowd. He said, you nailed to a cross by the hands of godless men and put him to death. You nailed, and can you imagine him saying that and pointing out to these people and saying, you nailed him to the cross. You nailed him to the cross. Now those godless people, that word means heathen. He was talking about the Romans. Because they assisted in the process. We all know the Jews did it, but they assisted in the process. And I kind of like the way he did this because pretty much, his crowd is pretty much Jewish people. Because as we look back, it talks about devout men, and they were all up at the Pentecost. And so he understood his crowd. You know, a good speaker says, well, let me check my crowd out first. You know, I know what I'm going to say and what I'm not going to say. And he didn't call them out like he could have. He called out the Romans because he was evangelizing. Now, number one thing I want you to know is that Jesus was predetermined, prearranged to die. Yeah, y'all were a part of it. The Romans were a part of it. But God knew and did it the way he wanted. Evangelism 101. Talk about Jesus. Talk about his death. Then what happens next? You talk about his resurrection. You don't have to talk about, once again, you don't have to talk about, well, you know, life's going to be wonderful. And you don't have to be encouraging about, well, if you come to Jesus, guess what? Things will be better. If you come to Jesus, you will live forever.
Amen.
That's what you offer.
Yeah, amen.
That's the offer.
Yes.
I will live forever. With who? With him. Oh,
Yes,
man.
Yes, Jesus.
Oh, that to me, I mean, if I was playing a game of poker or something like that, I think I got a stacked hand. I think I got 4 aces and whatever, maybe a wild card or something. I don't know. But all I know is that we got the best hand in town. Now let's deal it the proper way. Let's evangelize Jesus the proper way. Put the offer out there that we have a God that is sovereign, that has providence, that's omnipotent, that he loves us so much that he sent his only begotten son down to die so that we could live. If they don't want that, well, hey, oh well. You know, like the scriptures tell us, they sent out 70. He said, well, you make the offer and then, you know, put the dust off your feet. Keep it moving. So, let's go to verse 24. And exactly what I said. Next, if you talk about his life, you talk about the miracles, you talk about the signs, you talk about the wonders. This is how he was accredited as someone special, as Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah. Next, we talk about how it was predetermined how it happened, how he was crucified. It had to happen. Now we talk about where you can go to any other religion, but they can't say, and he was raised up. And God raised him up again, putting an end to the agony of death, since it was impossible for him to be held in its power, in its grip, in its hold. He got up.
Yes. Thank you.
He got up.
Yes, he did.
What an awesome God we got. He got up.
Thank you, Lord.
Guess what?
Thank you.
Paul tells us over in 1 Corinthians 15, because he got up, we get up.
Amen. Amen.
That we live forever too.
Amen.
Now, once again, in his ability to preach, he uses what? The Old Testament. Because remember now, there is no New Testament. No one's written anything at this point. It's all about what's been said in the Old Testament. So they have to reach back to that to show the fulfillment of things. But also because the scriptures in the Old Testament are full of testimony of Jesus. Let's go over to Luke 24. Because this attests to this. Jesus says this to him, 24 and 44. The Old Testament is full of concepts, ideals about Jesus. Almost every scripture you can find Jesus in. And this is what they're proving in this evangelistic 101 sermon, is that it proves to people, he goes to scripture, and every time he interprets it in a way that Jesus comes out in it. And so Jesus says this. He says, now he said to them, 24 and 44. Luke 24 and 44. Now he said to them, these are my words which I spoke to you while I was still with you, that all things which are written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms must be fulfilled. Now, what does that mean? All throughout the Old Testament, there were things said about Jesus that had to happen. With the crucifixion and all the events that occurred with Jesus, over 300 prophecies were fulfilled. Over 300 prophecies were fulfilled. Isn't that something? Over 300. Now, remember we talked about this a few weeks back. The Bible is the only religious book that is able to tell you something way back here that's going to happen way up there, and this came true.
Amen.
The only religious book.
Amen.
Buddhism doesn't do that. Islam does not predict anything. They're great books. They got good things in them. But the Bible shows the sovereignty of God, the omniscience of God, because he can tell you 500, 1,000 years back what's going to happen. We just saw in Genesis 3:15, he predicted the crucifixion of Christ, the raising of Christ. This was, what, we don't know, maybe 2 or 3 days into the creation of the earth. And this was then 2,000, 6,000 years later.